Welcome to Gunship.
Let's get going. So this year I'm going to talk a bit about the stuff that I do for a living. That's web development. So not so many macros today. Because this is a talk on web and the presentation is made with web technologies, it's going to be ugly as hell. Much like car mechanics used to drive the worst of cars. All right. So yeah, I'm going to try to share some insights. So last year, basically, well, almost since the last conference, I've been working most of the time for an agency in Leipzig, and they actually had a number of Flash apps that they maintain, and they needed to kind of bring them forward. I will show you why. Okay, this is loading. All right, so this is an interactive application that displays a school book, and there's all kind of information in there, and you can launch videos and paginate through the thing and all this kind of stuff. And so this was Flash, and the client, a school book publisher from Germany, wanted to bring this to the tablet. And of course, with Flash, that was a non-trivial task. So, yeah, I'm going to close this right here. And so, yeah, that one needed to be rewritten. And they got me for the job, kind of. And they were actually all set up how to do it, and they wanted to go ahead with JavaScript and some particular frameworks. And I said, no, I don't want this. Let's use Hex. And they said, never heard of it. So between, I think, the first briefing, which was a Friday, and the kickoff, which was a Monday, I built a small prototype just using Hex, which essentially had, well, some of the functionality at least. So you could paginate, and you have some zooming going on here and stuff like that, and you know, parts of the UI. So they were actually really quite pleased, and yeah, their message was basically, whatever you just proposed there, we want to do that. So this is, I hope, yeah, this is the current state of the application. So you see it's kind of similar. We're still a couple of weeks ahead of, well, the release is still to come. There's a couple of glitches in the UI still. But yeah, you can paginate here and stuff like that, or here, and all the zooming. And you can, you know, draw some annotations and things like that. And then, actually, this selection thing I'm quite fond of. Was probably the most complex part of the project. Okay. Yeah, all sorts of UIs. I don't know. There's some windows, and you can look for stuff, which was actually quite interesting in that we use images to display this because we no longer have Flash. So we have raster graphics, and then we have some other metadata to be able to perform such stuff. All right, I will not go into the rest of the details for now. Yeah. All right, and this actually got forked out of another project, which is some kind of Flash e-paper reader from the agency that I'm working with. This is what it looks like now, so that's actually, yeah, quite neat. But yes, of course, that also has the limitation that we can't really put it on a tablet and or a mobile device. And so right now, since about 2 weeks, I spent some time on making a prototype for that project. So roughly, this is the state that we've gotten it to, right? After there's probably some 20 hours of work in this one. So it's still very prototypical, but we have this menu here. This is like, for example, an overview, like the index of the thing. And this is an overview of all the pages. Here's some sharing UI. And the thing that's actually quite funny, because we have a CMS that allows to configure all of this, and it's lots of forms and stuff like that, you know, where you click and click there and check this checkbox, and then it does some stuff. And I'm going to emulate a bigger screen here. All right, and so we want to have it so that it's actually going into what you see is what you get direction. So for example, you can change the theme and you can see what it will look like. So if you go with a light color, then the font also becomes black and all this kind of stuff. And it even works with bizarre colors that some particular companies in Germany choose. All right, and there's this. You can even make it fully opaque and stuff like that. So this, yeah, it actually kind of works for most of the colors. And then you can also preview how it would look on other devices. So this is roughly the size of a MacBook Air, I think. That would be a tablet. That's an iPhone. Here we see that we have a lot of optimization to do for this. This has. But it was actually quite cool. Like, we never had to look at it on an iPhone to realize, okay, this is going to be crap. All right, so this is, yeah, the kind of stuff I've been doing lately, except for the Tinkerbell releases, which some of you may have seen. Okay, and so my first message to all of you, because I hear a lot of people saying, okay, using Haxe is kind of tedious for the web compared to, for example, JavaScript, TypeScript, all these kind of really more integrated things. And if it is that to you, I think you're doing it wrong. Because I can live with Haxe, and I'm kind of almost pathologically unable to perform tedious tasks. So I think it's always just a matter of finding the right way. I can't even tell that there is one. I'm going to show what works for me, but yeah. All right, after that, it's for you to decide. So one of the most important parts is to actually go and stick to the task, which programmers don't usually do. Right? There's a nice small story that I would like to read. A novice programmer was once assigned to code a simple financial package. The novice worked furiously for many days, but when his master reviewed his program, he discovered it contained a screen editor, a set of generalized graphic routines, an artificial intelligence interface, but not the slightest hint of anything financial. When the master asked about this, the novice became indignant. "Don't be so impatient. I'll put in the financial stuff eventually." This is from the Tower of Programming, a great book that everybody of you should read. Who has ever been in the position of the novice here? All right. So the important thing is to try to understand the problem. And what I realized after some time, that we actually prefer to create our own problems and live in our own world, because real problems are a lot harder to understand than the artificial ones we create. And in the end, we have a tendency to then blame everybody else for it. The users are too stupid, the operating system doesn't work well, all this kind of stuff. But usually that's actually not true. If you fail, then it's because of you. I'm sorry. And you also have to move beyond fear. It's something that okay. Yeah, great. Things that programmers are afraid of, I realized, is one, to admit their fear. This took me quite a while. And then they are also very afraid of making actual decisions. Programmers really don't like that because they think they can either lock themselves into something or be locked out of something. And then, of course, all the kind of human fears that you have, like you losing your face or looking stupid or all this kind of stuff. Like, for example, there is a certain programming language that had no releases for a long time because it was important for things to work and for things to look professional and all this kind of stuff, but I'm not sure that's really healthy. Like, I'm not even, I have no insight in that, but as an outsider, I was kind of puzzled by the things, how they were. Try also to engage more in practice and less in worship. That's generally quite a good idea when it comes to religions, and programming is a very religious endeavor, I think. And value your experience above projection. Like, look at the things that you know to work again and again and again, and not so much about this is great and things should be done this way and such and such. Like, when I first discovered Haxe, I was personally offended that people did not like it. All right. Now I've been using it for 5, 6, 7-ish years. It has given me so much fun. It has paid my bills, all this kind of stuff. So I don't care about what the world thinks of it, because for me it's all right. So yeah. All right. So now more to the website of things. The first most important thing to do is to learn CSS, because it is actually amazingly powerful. I think that I now probably closed something that I shouldn't have closed, but that doesn't matter. Yay. Okay, so this is the application again, and I'm going to do something funny. I'm going to disable JavaScript. No, hang on. This has to stay open. Reload the page. All right, we see there is no book anymore, but this still works. This still works, this still works, so does this kind of thing. And we can even enter this editor mode, and then toggle stuff. Like, this is all with JavaScript disabled, all right? And the way that it works is slightly hacky. Like, there's a lot of checkboxes all the way up in the DOM, and this maintains the state. And I'm not even saying that this is a very good idea to do, but it's something that you should understand that it works, why it works. It's also sometimes actually a better idea to do, because the updates to the DOM and to the parts that need to be re-rendered are absolutely in sync with whatever the browser implementer thought is good. Like, you don't make changes to the DOM at some point. It's just DOM state changes, and the engine responds as well as it can. And also, by using either checkboxes or radio buttons, you can actually define that some states are mutually exclusive, others are not. You don't have to manually take care of all that kind of stuff. So yeah, I mean, don't try this at home, but all right. Yeah, but CSS is also just about as unusable. And one thing I would like to propose to everyone is not to use CSS frameworks, for those of you who do some web programming, but to write semantic markup and then use appropriate tooling to deal with the styling. So which one? Everybody asks. It doesn't actually matter. I'm not going to endorse any particular one. But use something like, for example, the semantic grid of a bootstrap. It has the same type of grid that you would find in Bootstrap, but in the semantic grid system, you just write your markdown, your markup, actually. And then you use less mix-ins that then actually assign the column widths and all this kind of stuff. So you can, when you use CSS frameworks, you usually have like classes that say align right, align left, make it half, make it centered, or all this kind of stuff. And that's actually mixing HTML with CSS. Like, that was not why people, I think, invented this in the first place. And so this will work actually the same. You can even take Bootstrap and rip out some parts of it and then use it the same way that you would the semantic grid. I'm not saying this is particularly good. But yeah. All right. So one thing, another thing, I don't know, some people should learn about. I'm still in the process, actually, myself. A CSS flexbox, so that's actually a really nice new way to lay out content in CSS, which allows you to center stuff vertically. Also, change the order of elements, for example, just with CSS and all this kind of stuff, and have like, I mean, kind of it's roughly about as expressive as the layout engine was in the Flash Flex framework. I don't know where the name comes from, but yeah, okay. So you can do all this kind of cool stuff, and you can even have it wrap around and whatnot. So that's something to learn, and also learn about CSS post processes. For example, there's a tool that we use. It's called Autoprefixes. So instead of having to have all your vendor-specific prefixes all over the place, you can just take a CSS that uses just standard stuff. It goes through the post processor, and then it works on all the browsers. Like Autoprefixer, you can, for example, say, I want this to work on at least 97% of all browsers, then it's going to use some usage statistics that it has and do some crazy stuff. And it's, yeah, really quite cool because you can just go on MDN and all the stuff that is marked as standard there usually works relatively, well enough, I would say. Also, try to use the APIs. For those of you who don't know Vanilla.js, read up about it. It's a great JavaScript framework that has hex extents in the standard library. So you should try that. Also, one thing that's really interesting is Polyfill.io. That's actually a project from Mozilla. So they have actually gone through the trouble of figuring out, of building a Polyfill infrastructure that actually does use user agent sniffing, and it's just like, it comes from a giant CDN, and then you can just use normal, like the modern APIs, even down to IE6 in some cases. There are, of course, certain things that do not work, but yeah, as you see, there's a lot of the things here are blue. I think that means it's good. All right, so yeah, check that one out, and try to use the ubiquitous APIs and not something else. Like, many people have been using jQuery because it kind of hid the differences between browsers, but and that's a great thing to do. But they really married that with a whole way of programming. Like, you couldn't get one without the other. And usually none of those are actually what you need. What you actually need is to write against the APIs that you need. Okay, right, that's a tautology. Like, for example, like this is something, in Haxe you can even do this without any kind of overhead. You could hide a select element, so this kind of thing where you select, in an abstract type. This is something that we have in Haxe. And you can just say, okay, this is the one thing that interests me about it. It has a value, whatever value is. And it has a getter and a setter. And then there's some implementation that actually goes and finds out what that is. And then later on you can go and replace that. Like, for example, you can say, this is a select, it has a value, and then you can make an implementation based on radio buttons. It also basically just has that getter and setter, but you can also have a, I don't know, carousel, page flip, whatever super complex component that you would want. And it just works all the same because you just define that one bit that you want. There's this one property that you actually really care about. All right? David, you're looking a bit puzzled. All right. Well, anybody interested in understanding the code? All right, sure. So yeah, above there's just the interface for a select. So that's something that selects a value, which is a type parameter. And then we go on and implement this. So we have a scope that is, because radio buttons can be anywhere in the DOM. And the scope is the root node that we consider for looking for them in the first place. Then there's a codec that is something that is able to encode a string to a value, or the other way around. They could be a map that just does a lookup, or it could be something super complex that, I don't know, at least synchronously pulls stuff from the web, or whatever it is that you want. Now then you have the getter and the setter. They actually just use the encoder, and they query for the right radio button to find out where to actually pull that string from. And yeah, all right, I think we're at the bottom. Okay, is it roughly clear now? Yeah. Okay. So, and the question is, isn't that tedious, like to define all these kind of interfaces? And I have to admit, we don't do it all the time. But usually when we refactor, we move our code in that direction. But it's roughly the same overhead as representing data through data structures rather than through blobs. I mean, it's probably easier to just have an array of integers because you don't have to define any structure, but it becomes a mess rather quickly. And it also forces you to understand what you are doing, and as I said before, that's actually something you should try to do. Then there's another subject that people talk about a lot, interfacing with the JS ecosystem, and the issue is that writing externs is tedious work. But I think that actually interfacing with third-party libraries should be no different than interfacing with the DOM. And so you don't need full externs, you just follow these 3 steps. Express what you need to do in an interface. So that's the tricky part, because you actually need to understand what it is. Find a library that could do it. This also takes time. And then just write a small adapter and only as much externs as you need to do that. Like this is, when this approach is maybe brought to extreme, it would converge somewhere toward Martin Fowler's hexagonal architecture stuff. I'm not saying to hide everything, but it's usually a good route to take. Just hide things. And if you want to go quick and dirty, then just use untyped, dynamic, any kind of stuff. My dear colleague has practiced this a lot. I mean, if you want to write externs, and that's a noble pursuit, please do. All right, we are in bad need of them. But that's a different task than actually doing what your users need from you. And if you really need to make something happen, then please don't complain about stuff. If you can, provide a solution. And if you can't, define the problem. Because on the mailing list, there's sometimes this kind of vibe of things just not working and things like that. And often there's not even a constructive idea of what to do, even if it would be hard to. So for example, there's this thing that you can't copy-paste JS. So there is a small library that I actually just pushed when you had lunch. All right, I'm just going to skip to the next example. That allows you to denote a field with the snippet metadata, and then a JS file of the same name has to be lying right next to it, and then the code gets just pulled in, and the parameters that you define are available within the JS function. All right, so you can just take a bunch of JavaScript, dump it on into your class path, and then use it like this. I mean, this is only slightly convenient over writing your untyped JS thing yourself, but then you get into all these kinds of intricacies of having to escape slashes, and it kind of, you can't have JS syntax highlighting because it's in a string in a hex file. This should also, in theory, work for Java, C#, and PHP, but it's completely untested. All right. And in theory, you could even go further and then do stuff like, this is just a macro. You could then call the CoffeeScript compiler at compile time to allow you to also paste in CoffeeScript snippets if you wanted to, but I didn't have time for that. All right. And another thing is, I think, is actually a good idea to invent your own wheels. Just please don't try to reinvent the wheel. Instead, do something that works well for you, and don't be afraid if there's something that looks like it could do 80% of your job. I mean, and then at the bottom line you find out that you spend 3 times as much fixing other people's code than to write it yourself, which would have been faster and more fun. And so actually the way from usable to reusable code is relatively easy. Like once code is good, which is hard to accomplish, it's easy to make it reusable. But the way from unusable to usable code is very, very hard. And so this is actually, I think, yeah, I've been really fast today. Okay, this is my wrap-up already. Haxe.js should not be tedious. If you stick to the task, move a bit beyond your fear, practice more, worship less, learn CSS, learn the APIs, invert dependency, make happen what you really need. And if you invent your own wheels to make your way, then it's going to work just fine. All right, thank you. Questions?
So, how much macros are involved in the samples you've shown?
Sorry?
How much macros are involved in the samples you've shown? Because it didn't look like vanilla Haxe.
How much macros are in the code? Well, actually, like for example, like we can look at this. This is the project, like the rewrite. All right, this one. Oh, also, we are not associated with BP in any way, if anyone is wondering. It's just, yeah.
I mean, you had like a very...
And this one uses a lot of macros. So there's, we use Tink XML, for example, to parse the XMLs that define the data, which historically come out of the CMS that is part of the system. So you can see that, for example, here. And the thing is, like, it allows you to just define type defs with saying that some things are tags, some things are attributes, some things are optional, some things are lists of tags and all this kind of stuff. You can also have enums that allow you to have different kinds of tags in the same position and all this kind of stuff. And then the macro just goes and creates a validating parser that traverses the XML and spits out the object structure like that. Then we take that, we pipe that through a Tink template. So that would be, for example, yeah, you see. Oh, okay, I haven't taught Flash Develop to recognize this as HTML just yet. But it's just a template language like any other, except it uses smileys. And it's processed at compile time, and actually the things that fall out are true Haxe classes. So you can then freely organize your code as you would organize other Haxe code. Like it can call itself, you can put all the rendering logic in there, you can have import, you can have using, you can have all the goodies from Tinklang, such as parallel loops and all this kind of stuff. And yeah, I think macro-wise that's actually... Oh, and we are using Tinklang because I'm a very lazy writer.
I was curious about the radio box example, where you were using a syntax where you had input square bracket, type equals checkbox.
Oh, okay, that's standard Haxe. I'm sorry if that was... Where is it? Haha. No. Yes. Okay. Which part? Oh no, there's just a bunch of missing quotes there. Like you add a single quote at the front and the beginning, and then it's just an interpolated string. I'm sorry. Like,
yeah, but I thought that was some macro magic.
No, this is just pure
It
hex.
was looking really interesting.
No, that is just a selector with the name variable actually gets then drawn down. I mean, becomes part of it. Okay. Other questions? Yes, Justin.
I was just going to ask, you don't keep, once you've done selection, if you're going to need it again, you don't keep it?
No. But I mean, like, for example, the codec object itself could...
You've got all the selector code, the query stuff.
Yeah.
Once you've got it, is it not worth sometimes keeping hold of it?
What are we talking about exactly? This bit?
Yeah, for instance. But in the abstract, if you used a real class, you could then hold on to the value that you've got, so you wouldn't need to do the query search again.
Yeah, I suppose you could.
Is that a good idea or bad idea?
Depends. I mean, when it comes to performance, measure and then, react.
So does it work fully on the front end? Do you have a backend for this? I think I missed. Do you have a backend component for this application?
Yeah. So all this, I mean, all the stuff that you've seen is actually the workflow. Usually is we consume big XMLs with our XML library, then that rushes through. It gives us hex data. This usually happens on Nico, but it could happen any place where you have file system access. And then this is rendered as an HTML that's just dumped, and then another part comes in that's also hex JavaScript. And there we, for example, we use the same template library because as it just creates normal hex code that is embedded with the rest of your code, it's available everywhere. It also, the cool thing is like you can just import all of your templates and then DCE is just going to throw out all the stuff that you're not using anyway.
So it's generated at compile time, basically?
Yeah.
Okay.
You just get a function that takes some arguments and gives you back a string.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was complicated.
So were you working on these e-paper apps with other JavaScript developers, or was it just you on those?
It's actually on the first project that I showed. I'm working with one other developer who's here, who was made a hexer since 9 months, and now I'm taking on the second project. I'm taking on another colleague to teach him some of the beauty of this language.
You're doing the Lord's work, converting JavaScript developers to hex developers.
And I think, are you happy? Good answer. All right, that's it, I suppose. Okay.
Welcome to Gunship.